Well, good morning, church, and welcome back to Soul Fuel as we continue to go through the book of Revelation together. Now, after much consideration, I've decided to break the 7 trumpets up into 2 pieces. It's going to be 2 small pieces rather than just one really big piece because the last 3 of the trumpets take up quite a bit of information. So we're going to be going through Revelation chapter 8, verses 2 through 12 this evening. Like I said, this will be a shorter study this evening, but I thought it would make more sense to do 2 short ones versus one really, really long one. So picking up in Revelation chapter 8, verses 2. Now this is right after we've come through the seals being opened. We've seen a lot of things happening in that, and it's going to get more wrathy from here on out. But it says, "Then I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. And another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake." So once again, we open up with "Then I saw," kind of like the period of, and now something new is happening. And it talks about these 7 angels. And some people think that the 7 angels refer to the 7 lampstands and the 7 spirits. But what makes a little bit more sense to me is that these are the 7 angels that are discussed throughout Jewish apocalyptic literature. And they're even named. And you'll recognize these names because, honestly, a lot of science fiction and fantasy books use these names in their writings, but their origins are in Judaism, and they have a biblical narrative. So, we didn't steal this from Diablo 2 or anything like that. So we have Uriel, Raphael, Ragael, Michael, which everybody recognizes Michael, Sariel, Gabriel, everybody knows that one too, and Remiel. Now, these are the only named archangels that we know of, but I think it's important for us to know this because their importance isn't in who they are or in the fact that we have names for them. Their importance is in their stance and in their action. They stand, which means they continually stand in the presence of God, before God. They stand not only as a form of respect, but they stand ready to serve at all times. And these angels are given 7 trumpets, 1 each, in which they will announce the judgments and victory of God as we continue throughout the rest of Revelation. The angels stand ready, but something else happens first. Another angel appears. Now, we don't have a name for this one, and it's thought that this angel might be Christ, but it's more likely a way of showing Christ from fulfillment of the high priestly role. So the angel comes and tends to the altar in heaven, and in which you've got incense burning as the elders are lifting up their prayers. And he comes to the heavenly altar with a censer. Now this would be, if you ever had a wood-burning fireplace at home, a censer is a lot like the little shovel that you would use to scoop out embers and ash and things like that. And the angel comes with this golden censer as the incense is swirling up about God, which is lifting up the prayers of God. And remember, the elders are crying out for judgment. They're crying out for justice and accountability. And as these cries are coming up, and you get this image of the prayers circling around God as the incense smoke is circling around God, and the angel takes a huge scoop of fire and embers and ash and throws it onto the earth. And the instant results of that are that there's earthquakes and thunder and rumblings and flashing of lightning. And remember, all these things are a way of announcing God and God's judgment. So the impending judgment of God is announced to the world when the embers and fire and ash are thrown from the altar onto earth, and then the angels begin to blow their trumpets. It says, now the angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to blow them. So the first 4 trumpets are very similar. Each angel sounds a trumpet, a plague is unleashed, and then there's a disastrous result. And that's what we're going to go through today for the remainder of today. We're going to look at the first 4 trumpets. Next week we'll go through the last 3 because there are woes that are attached to them, and it has more details to it. So they're similar to the horsemen in the way that all affect not only just humans but nature. It affects the world. So the trumpets announce the punishment on the world's opposition of God. So the first angel blew his trumpet. This is verse 7. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. So the judgment begins with hail and fire mixed with blood. And you get this idea that this must have taken place somewhere in heaven, this mixing, because it speaks as if in the same way as the angel with the censer throws the embers and things, that this mixture of fire and hail and blood is thrown onto the earth. So the plague resembles the Egyptian plague of hail and fire, except now you've got blood mixed in with it as well, which I believe is a response to the elders' outcry for judgment, because it is their blood that's been spilled. So I believe these judgments begin with blood being mixed in with the hail and the fire as a response of, this is because of shed blood, among any other things. But they're hurled down onto the earth, and the results are disastrous. It affects a third of all the earth and the trees. So you got to think about it. It's burned up. There's blood mixed with it. It's this disgusting, nasty thing. And the trees would include fruit trees as well, on which people would rely on for food as well as their livelihood. So we see a third of nature, for lack of a better term, burned up. Some people say this is linked to the horsemen, the plague horsemen, and the idea that the fruit trees being destroyed. But there was a wind that was used that stopped the grass all of the grass being destroyed in that one, whereas all of it is destroyed in this one, because all the green grass is burned up. So picking up in verse 8, the second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain. Oh, well, here we go. So the first trumpet is played, and we have hail, fire, and blood. The second trumpet is played, and I'll read the scripture. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So we have something like a burning mountain goes into the sea. So again, we see the judgments affect a third. So something like a mountain that is on fire falls into the sea. Now, some people think this is a meteor. I don't think it's supposed to be like a specific event that we can say, that's what this is. Uh, because when the meteor hits the sea, if it's a traditional meteor that we would think of, the fire would burn up the sea. What we don't see here is fire that burns up the sea. What we see here is that the waters are turned to blood. And because of that, a third of all the sea creatures are destroyed, and a third of all the ships that are on the waters are destroyed as well, because after all, ships are not meant to sail in blood. I can imagine that would cause all kinds of horrific mechanical failures among any other thing. So fire is a major part of the first three trumpets. And again, this is another plague that resembles Egypt when the Nile was turned to blood and all the creatures in there died as well. So the third angel blows his trumpet. This is verse 10. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and springs of water. The name of the star was Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from water because it had been made bitter. So this torch, this star, comes down from heaven, but it particularly targets essentially drinkable water. And when it hits the waters, it doesn't turn them to blood or anything this time. It becomes wormwood. Wormwood is linked very close to, and let's see if I can say this word correctly, absinthe, which in small amounts has been used for many different things. Medicine, some people use it for alcohol, but in great amounts, it's poisonous and it can be lethal. So what you see here is a third of the drinkable water on the world becomes something that in large quantities will kill, will kill us. So the result of that is that many people died of the water because the access to fresh water has been poisoned. And what we see here is the antithesis of living water. God says that to those who will come to him, they are giving living water that will well up within them and lead them to an eternal life. What we see here is the antithesis of that, and it is water that brings about death. This water brings death, not life. And then finally, the final trumpet that we're going to discuss this evening, verse 12. The fourth angel blew his trumpet. I missed one here, hold on. So the third one is blown, and we get a torch, which is wormwood. And then the fourth one, which we'll discuss today, is this is verse 12. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. So the fourth plague is, might as well just say, darkness. And what we see is the sun, the moon, and the stars are struck, and their light is reduced by a third. So the world literally becomes darker. So, we know that people, when they're denied sunlight for a long periods of time, things like depression, health issues arise. So imagine a world where everything is reduced to where, I'll say, for an example, I don't know if the mathematics will be correct on this, late evening, just before the sun's gone when it's dark, if that's as bright as it ever got, we're going to see depression, we're going to see sickness, we're going to see plant life die. So darkness is the fourth trumpet. But the plagues aren't done yet. But I want to stop here because the last three that we talk about will take even longer than just what we've talked about here. I know this is short today. I think we're up to like 14 minutes. We're usually at around half an hour or longer. But I would rather break this into two halves because what we're going to talk about next week, just in these three trumpets with the woes, will take up a chunk of time. So I know we're stopping right in the middle of what is some pretty rough stuff. Next week's going to be some pretty rough stuff because we're into the judgments here. We're going to be going through the judgments and things like that for a little time, which can be difficult to read, but we also realize that God has also said that His people are taken care of in this time, and that also that the opening for people to come to Him is still possible. So I pray that you'll join with us next week, and that we can continue going through the book of Revelation together. God bless, church.